It's 20,000 years ago, the middle of winter, and the world you live in is actively trying to kill you. There's no house, no door to close, no wall of insulation between your skin and the sky. The temperature is dropping past -20, -30. The wind is screaming off the ice sheets, does not stop for hours. It doesn't stop for days. Now look down at yourself. You are a soft, hairless, tropical animal. Your body was designed for the African savanna, and somehow you are standing in the middle of an ice age. So here's the question almost nobody stops to ask. How did you survive that night? Not with central heating, not with a furnace, not with a thermostat you nudge up 2 degrees when your feet get cold. Every single tool you would reach for today did not exist yet. And yet somehow you made it to the morning. You lived. Somebody who is the only reason you were here watching this. This is the story of how ancient humans beat the cold with nothing. And the real answer is far stranger and far more clever than they just lived in caves. Let's just start with how bad it actually was. Because when people picture the Ice Age, they picture a chilly forest, some snow, a guy in a fur cape looking mildly inconvenienced. That is not what that was. Around 20,000 years ago, the planet hit what scientists call the last glacial maximum, the coldest, harshest stretch of the entire Ice Age. Giant sheets of ice, kilometers thick, miles thick, buried most of northern Europe and North America, where humans lived. On the open plains at the edge of that ice, winters were brutal, dry, and endless. And here's the detail that changes everything. In a lot of these places, there were barely any trees. Think about what that means. No trees is no lumber. No lumber is no cabin, no log walls, no wooden frame. The one building material your instincts scream for simply was not there. So the humans surviving on those frozen plains had a problem with no obvious solution. No wood, no houses, no heating, and the winter engineered to freeze them solid. So what did they do first? They did one thing our species had already been doing for a very, very long time. They made fire. Fire is the oldest weapon humans ever had against the cold. Our ancestors were controlling fire as far back as 1,000,000 years ago, long before we were even Homo sapiens. By the Ice Age, fire wasn't a discovery anymore. It was ancient technology. It was the beating heart of every camp. It gave heat, it gave light, it cooked food, it kept predators back in the dark. But here's the thing about fire that people forget. Fire is a hungry, needy, high-maintenance tool. It needs fuel constantly. It needs shelter from the wind or it dies. And it only warms the side of you that's facing it. Anyone who has ever sat at a campfire knows this feeling. Your face is roasting, your back is chilling. Fire is incredible, but fire alone does not save you from a -30 night with a howling wind. If fire were the whole answer, this would be a very short video. So fire was step 1. Fire was necessary. But fire was maybe 10% of the actual solution, which brings us to the thing everyone assumes was the answer: caves. We literally call people cavemen. The image is baked into our brain. Ancient human, cold outside, so obviously he walks into a cave and problem solved, right? Not so fast. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about caves. Caves are rare. A cave has to form in the right kind of rock, in the right kind of landscape, facing the right direction, near water, near food, and not already occupied by something with claws that would very much like to eat you. On the vast open plains where a lot of Ice Age humans actually lived, there were no convenient caves at all. Just grass, wind, ice, and sky in every direction. And even where caves existed, they weren't the cozy stone apartments we imagine. They were dark, damp, cold, often already claimed by cave bears and cave lions. Evicting a cave lion is not a beginner-level survival task. So caves helped some people, sometimes in some places. But most humans surviving the Ice Age were not tucked safely inside a mountain. They were out in the open, which means the real breakthrough, the invention that actually kept our species alive, was something else entirely. And you're wearing a version of it right now: clothing. This is the hidden hero of the whole story, and it almost never gets the credit, because clothing doesn't survive in the ground the way stone or bone does. Animal skins rot. fur decays. So for a long time, we had no idea when humans first started dressing to stay alive. Then scientists found a genuinely brilliant workaround. They studied lice. Stay with me, because this one is one of the coolest tricks in all of archaeology. There are two kinds of lice that live on humans: head lice, which live in your hair, and body lice, which specifically live in clothing. Body lice literally could not exist until humans had clothes for them to live in. So if you figure out when body lice split from head lice, you figure out roughly when humans started wearing clothes regularly. And the answer to that DNA gave was staggering. Around 170,000 years ago. That's not a typo. Long before the Ice Age we have been talking about, long before those frozen plains, humans had already been wearing clothing for over 100,000 years. We got dressed almost the moment the climate first turned cold. Clothing wasn't a comfort, clothing was the survival technology that let a tropical animal walk straight into the freezer and live. But early clothing had a problem. Draping a raw animal skin over your shoulders is better than nothing, but it's loose. Wind gets in, cold air pours through every gap at your neck, your wrist, your waist. A loose hide is a blanket, not a system. And on a -30 night, a blanket with gaps in it will still let the cold reach you and kill you. So humans did the thing humans always do. They upgraded. And the upgrade was one tiny, unglamorous, absolutely world-changing invention: the needle. The oldest-eyed sewing needle we have ever found comes from a place called Denisova Cave in Siberia. It's carved from birdstone. It has a hole punched through the top for thread, and it is roughly 50,000 years old. It's so well made, it would basically still work today. Think about what a needle actually unlocks. A needle means you can sew. Sewing means you can join pieces of hide together. Joining hide means you can build clothing that wraps your body completely. Fitted sleeves, sealed seams, layers, hoods, trousers that can trap warm air against your skin instead of letting it leak away. That is the entire difference between a caveman shivering under a rug and an Ice Age human striding across a frozen plain in a tailored fur suit. And they got shockingly good at it. At a site in Russia called Sungir, archaeologists found graves from around 34,000 years ago where bodies had been buried in clothing covered with thousands of tiny carved ivory beads. Those beads mapped out the exact shape of the outfits: fitted caps, long-sleeved jackets, trousers sewn right into boots, tailored winter gear, maybe by hand, tens of thousands of years ago. But even the best clothing only handles the outside of the problem, because there's a second war being fought, and it's happening inside your body. Here's something people never think about. Staying warm isn't just about blocking cold air. Your body is a furnace, and that furnace runs on fuel. That fuel is food, specifically fat and calories. In a freezing climate, your body burns through energy at a ferocious rate just to keep your core temperature up, which means survival wasn't only about shelter, it was about calories. Ice Age humans needed enormous amounts of fatty, energy-dense food just to keep the internal fire lit. This is a huge part of why they hunted massive animals. A single mammoth wasn't just meat, it was fat, fuel, warmth, and material, all walking around in one giant package. Eating well in the Ice Age wasn't a luxury, it was heating. And the human body itself started to adapt to the cold too. Look at the Neanderthals. Our tough, cold climate cousins who lived through these winters for hundreds of thousands of years, their bodies were shorter, stockier, more compact, barrel chests, shorter limbs. A build that holds heat better, because a compact body loses warmth more slowly than a long, lanky one. The cold was literally reshaping the human animal. Fire on the outside, fuel on the inside, and a body slowly bending itself to survive. But we still haven't answered the biggest question. The people on those treeless plains with no caves and no wood, where did they actually sleep? And this is where the story gets genuinely jaw-dropping. Because when there are no trees to build with, you look around at what the frozen world does have. And what those plains had in enormous numbers was mammoths, giant animals with giant bones, and some brilliant, desperate, resourceful human looked at those bones and had one of the boldest ideas in all of prehistory. If you can't build a house out of wood, build one out of monsters. In Ukraine, at a site called Mezrich, Archaeologists uncovered something that sounds almost impossible. Circular huts built almost entirely out of mammoth bones. One of them was constructed from the bones and tusks of dozens of mammoths. One of them carefully stacked and interlocked into walls, jawbones layered like bricks, tusks arching over the entrance, and the whole frame was likely covered with hides to seal it against the wind. And the timing was perfect. The largest of these mammoth bone structures dates to roughly 18,000 years ago, right in the coldest, cruelest heart of the Ice Age. Stop and picture that for a second. A dome of bleached bone and tusk, wrapped in fur, a fire glowing inside, sitting alone on an endless field of ice. That is not a caveman cowering in the dark. That is an engineer. Someone who looked at the world with no building materials and invented architecture out of the only giant thing available. And these weren't flimsy overnight shelters either. The evidence suggests at least one of these bone houses was returned to and reused across generations, possibly for centuries. No trees, no problem. They just built with the biggest animal on the continent. But there's one last piece of the puzzle, and it's the one we understand best because we still feel it every single day. Other people. No single human survives an Ice Age winter alone. It's not possible. You cannot hunt, gather, fuel, tend the fire, sew the clothing, build the shelter, and stay warm all at once, by yourself, forever. The cold kills the loner. So the ones who lived did it together. They shared body heat, packed close in those bone huts and cave mouths. They took turns keeping the fire alive through the night. They shared food so that a bad hunt for one didn't mean death for the one. They passed down knowledge, which plans, which routes, which tricks, which mistakes not to repeat. The fire circle wasn't just for warmth. It was the original social network, and it ran on trust. Because everything we have talked about, the fire, the clothing, the needle, the mammoth bone house, none of it really is the work of one clever individual. It's the work of a group, a community stacking knowledge on top of the knowledge they already had, generation after generation, each one handling the next a slightly better chance at seeing spring. So let's go back to that freezing night, 20,000 years ago. You, the soft tropical animal standing in the killing cold. You survived it, not because you were the strongest, not because you had thick fur or claws or antifreeze in your blood. You survived because you carried fire, because you wore clothing sewn tight against the wind with a bone needle, because you filled your body with fat to keep the inner furnace burning, because you built a home out of the bones of giants, and because you were not alone, you were surrounded by people who kept the fire going even when you were sleeping. That is how humans beat the Ice Age with nothing, not with strength, with ideas. And every one of those ideas got passed down through 100,000 winters, through countless people who made it to morning and taught their children how, all the way down to you. So the next time you're cold and you pull on a jacket or close the door or turn up the heat without even thinking about it, remember something. You are the descendant of the ones who didn't freeze. Every single one of your ancestors survived the winter because none of them ever survived it alone.